The Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and your local cable provider presents Cable Reports. Join us now as Cable Reports brings you up to date on current issues facing the Commonwealth through discussions with your local legislators and other policymakers from across Virginia.
Welcome from the General Assembly in the City of Richmond. I'm Woody Evans for Cable Reports and Comcast. And a warm welcome to our guests from Montgomery County and the Blacksburg area. Senator John Edwards, good to see you, sir.
Thank you, Woody. Thanks for having me.
Delegate Joseph Yost.
Thank you, sir.
The scholar from the holler, you understand. And Delegate Nick Rush, the youngest member ever elected to the Montgomery County Board of Supervisors.
That's the trivia question.
Well, I'll start with you. Tell us a little bit about your district, what's going on there, especially in terms of the economy and jobs.
Well, thanks, Woody, and thanks for having me. My district, I'm lucky enough to represent Pulaski County, other than a couple precincts, all of Floyd County, and about 50% of Montgomery County. As with all elected officials at this time, the economy is the number one issue facing my constituents. You know, our unemployment rate in the New River Valley is actually quite good. We're actually, I was lucky enough to serve on the New River Valley Economic Development Alliance before taking this position, and the New River Valley actually had a lower unemployment rate than the Silicon Valley.
Really?
But right now we have too many people underemployed, doing jobs that are below their skill set, and so we, as elected officials, had to make sure we have that environment. And I'm doing those things, working with our economic development officials locally, try to get companies to expand. I've met with companies that want to expand and come into the area over the last year and a half, and continue to do some of those things.
Great. Well, we'll get to some specific pieces of legislation that you have introduced as we move along.
Thank you.
Delegate, how are things going for you this session? We're less than 30 days, I think, in this 45-day short session, and of course, this is your second year here, I believe.
Things have been going really good. You know, I represent the upper half of the New River Valley, so Nick has the bottom half. I've got all of Giles County, the city of Radford, pretty much the rest of Montgomery County, and 2 precincts in Pulaski. You know, like Delegate Rush said, yes, we have been doing pretty well in the New River Valley, and of course Virginia as a whole. You know, we've got 2 major universities there, Radford University and Virginia Tech, particularly Virginia Tech and their corporate research center, and a lot of things they have going on, I think, has been really good in keeping us afloat comparatively to other localities in Southwest Virginia.
Great. Senator Edwards, I'm sure you're hearing from your constituents about the core functions of government and jobs and the economy, among other things.
Those are the most important things we do. Yes, I represent, in addition to the Giles County and Montgomery County, Roanoke City and part of Roanoke County as well. It's a delightful district. I love it. Connecting the New River Valley and the Roanoke Valley, I've always thought the 2 valleys had a common destiny, and I think that's really true. We're seeing that in particular now with things such as Virginia Tech Carilion School of Medicine, Virginia Tech Carilion Research Institute. That's just one example, but they're doing extremely well. I'm very proud of what's happening at Tech with Virginia Tech and of course the Corporate Research Center. So we're making a lot of progress.
Great. And of course our institutions of higher learning are critical to the continued success of the Commonwealth. And of course the governor has a package this year, the year of the teacher, of course, K through 12, but I'm sure that's an important matter as well to you and your constituents.
Woody, it's very important. Just this morning, starting out early, I've met with Floyd County school superintendent and members of their school board, and then right after that was Pulaski County, the superintendent and members of their school board. I think the governor's worked real hard on getting compromise in his K through 12 reform package this year. That's why you see the superintendents supporting it, the VEA is supporting it, or parts of it. And it's something I'm looking real hard at, and I believe I'm going to be able to support. Some of the things I'd like to see, maybe as it moves through the legislative process, is allowing the localities a little more flexibility with the raise, because they're going to have to come up with some matching funds. And being a former chairman of the Board of Supervisors, I know that those things can be difficult, so I'm always looking out at that angle. But you know, as a product of public schools and the son of a school teacher, I'm very attuned to those issues, and I know how important it is in Southwest Virginia. We have great school systems in my district, and we've got to make sure that they stay strong.
And of course, some of your constituents use farm vehicles a lot, and current law limits their ability to drive more than 50 miles, and I believe you have some legislation relating to that.
I had some unsuccessful legislation on that. The problem was brought to me, and in my day job, I work for the Virginia Farm Bureau, and so I get to work with people in agriculture all the time. It's a great honor. And what it does is the current limitation is for unlicensed farm vehicles, and it may lock in some of the more rural farmers into a particular stock market. And that if that stock market is not bringing the prices, doesn't have the bidders, doesn't have the things, it could put them at a competitive disadvantage. And so I'm gonna be working. The legislation I proposed didn't make it out of subcommittee. There were some problems. The state police had some problems with it, and DMV had some problems with it. So I'm gonna try to work with those groups and see if we can make sure that the most rural farmers that we have in Virginia can maintain their competitive advantage. So.
And of course, you're also working with the Department of Motor Vehicles on some registration issues as well.
Yes, and that was an issue that come about as we all suffered with the straight line windstorm at the end of June. I had several constituents call and say they were being charged late fees, and that happened at the very end of the month. The DMV was closed; they were out of power. My constituents were at home worried about a tree on their house or across from their line or without power, couldn't get online to pay the registration. So what my legislation, and this did make it out of committee and it's passed the House, hopefully the Senate will pass it, is allows the DMV and the governor to extend that where you don't have late fees over 90 days, especially when it's not your fault. When you have a declared emergency or a natural disaster, it's kind of common sense legislation, and something that just we needed to address. And I hated the fact that we had to have a storm to do it, but now we know.
Right. So are you counting on your colleague, Senator Edwards?
Yeah, I'm sure that he's a common sense guy, so I'm sure he'll be with it.
Speaking of common sense, Senator Edwards, the governor's package on transportation has been subject to some criticism, to say the least. Give us the lay of the land there.
Yeah, common sense, you're right. It's like some common sense, and the common sense is, the fact of the matter is about a third, 30% of the people who pay the gas tax are out-of-staters.
That many, that percentage.
That's right, it's a huge percentage. And they use our roads. Shouldn't they assist us in paying for our roads and for maintaining our roads? So I think we ought to stick with the concept of the gas tax. It's by far the best way. It's the ideal user fee. It captures, as I say, people out of state and let them help assist. They come into our roads and they pass through Virginia and they tear up our roads, and they should share in it. So I think most people I talk to say we ought to stick to the gas tax approach as opposed to dipping into the general fund. Now the governor wants to raise the sales tax from 5.5% to 5.8%. That means people who don't even have cars will be paying for roads, and he wants to use that extra amount to pay for roads. And first of all, it doesn't cover the problem. It doesn't solve the problem by a long shot. He's also counting on the federal government passing this legislation that allows the states to tax online purchases, even if we are buying it out of state, which right now is prohibited. But that's not likely to happen, by the way. So there's a lot of smoke and mirrors attached to the governor's plan. But I think, and people I talk to think, roads ought to be paid by the users of the roads, and the gas tax is a perfect user fee. In addition, you can limit how much you pay by having a more fuel-efficient car. By other forms of transportation. So the user of the roads does have some control over that by the size of the car and the more fuel-efficient car a person has. So most people think, as I do, that the way to solve the problem of transportation is to do it through the gas tax approach rather than taking it out of the general fund. The other problem with the general fund, because the transportation fund is separate from the general fund, and he kind of wants to merge them. The problem with that is education will compete with transportation funding. You don't want that to happen. You want the Transportation Trust Fund to stand on its own, and then education, public safety, that sort of thing that comes out of the general fund should not have to compete with transportation.
Delegate Yost, I don't think there's any question but that the gas tax has been a declining source of revenue for our transportation needs, especially since it was never indexed to inflation. But is this the way to solve the problem?
Well, the interesting thing, the last time the gas tax was actually indexed was 1986, which was the year that I was born. So it's been 26 years since it's been touched. You know, I think when you talk to individuals like Senator Edwards or the governor's office or anything, I think we all have different viewpoints, different perspectives about transportation, but I don't think there's any disagreement about the fact that we need to fix transportation in Virginia. You know, we have consistently been ranked over the years as the best state in the nation to do business, usually number 1, number 2. This year we dropped back to number 3. Number 3 is not a bad spot to be in, but if you look at the rankings and they tell us why we dropped back, it's because of our transportation system. And if we really want to continue to be the best state to do business and continue to bring jobs and economic development to the Commonwealth, we have to fix our roads. Because if you can't get your product from point A to point B in any given amount of time, you know, why would you want to come here and invest your money?
The diesel fuel tax would not go away, however, and I guess that's in recognition of the fact that the large trucks that traverse our highways and byways cause quite a bit of damage. And right now, we are only using those transportation funds for maintenance, not construction. And by, what is it, 2014 or 2018, we will be busted, in essence.
That's right, by 2016 or
2016,
something like that.
And you are correct. I mean, the 17.5 cents on diesel would be kept there. I think the estimates are that 80 to 85% of the damage on our roadways is done by the heavy trucks and tractor trailers that pass through.
Delegate Rush, what about this concern relative to those who don't reside in the Commonwealth, yet they use our roads? I take it that the hope is that the increased sales tax and the visiting to our retail stores when we do have tours will make up the difference.
Well, that is what the governor believes, and the governor has a little different number. Their number was about 9% of transportation gas taxes that comes from out of state. It's probably somewhere in between that.
Well, it's they tell me, the Senate Finance Committee, 11% by tourists. Yeah. And 25% by commercial truckers. Okay. And if you combine that, actually some of those are intrastate. If you combine that, the Senate Finance Committee says about a third or maybe 30% in that range.
Yeah. And not, you know,
right.
I wasn't trying to correct John. I'm just telling, you know, saying that those are some of the other side's point of. I haven't made my mind up on this. I have to, you know, for one, it's a moving target. I think the governor's introduced a plan, several senators and delegates have introduced plans, and the word that we've been given is that this thing is going to change over this General Assembly session. But I am concerned about raising the sales tax on working families. We just had a payroll tax, and I'll share a story with a girl from Floyd who called my office and said, "Nick, I just got my paycheck. I'm making $22 or less a week now, and that was my gas money." Floyd County is about 60% of my constituents in Floyd County drive outside the county to work. And with that payroll tax increase, was not something Virginia did, but something the federal government did, has really put a hurting on working families. And so I got to see how that's going to affect. Got to see the final product. I mean, I know there's a problem. We're looking to look for a solution. I'm not sure we're there yet.
But certainly maintaining the businesses we have in your district and in the Commonwealth and attracting other businesses to the state and your district is going to be dependent upon this transportation resolution.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And it's when I was served on the Board of Supervisors, people would come and say, "Well, Nick, I don't have a child in school. Why do I have to pay any property tax for schools?" Well, the whole thing is that because you enjoy a nurse that can read and write, and the best health care we can provide, and retail services and engineering services that we all use, and so we have to have a good, strong education system. The same with transportation. We all benefit by having an efficient mode of transportation, whether it be for goods, services, and ultimately, if you have an efficient if you're the most efficient you can be in transportation or education, it actually drives down the cost of goods, because it'll be easier. In my former life, I used to be a FedEx truck driver, and so I got to be around. I drove the van, not an 18-wheeler, but but I got to be around people that were in the transportation industry. And if you want to look at something, go into a truck stop and say, when they're advertising for jobs, no New York City route, deliveries. New York City costs more to deliver to, thus the higher cost for the citizens. We got to make sure we're efficient in transportation so it'll actually lower costs for our constituents.
Right. Senator Edwards, one of the biggest applause lines that the governor got in his State of the Commonwealth address, of course, related to his proposal to make automatic the restoration of civil rights. Died an early death over here on the House side, but I understand it may at least be on life support in the Senate.
I think the Senate will support it. It's a good idea. Most states, vast majority, once you serve your time, your probation time, you pay your fines, restitution, all the rest, automatically you would get your right to vote back, your citizenship rights back, and be restored. These are people who are going to be restored eventually anyway, in most cases. And most people who go to prison are going to get out. And you want to make sure they can come back into the system as law-abiding citizens. So our system that we've had forever is the governor has sole discretion as to whether to restore your civil rights, to allow you to vote again, for example, or hold public office. And it can be arbitrary. And the governor and the attorney general both, and I applaud them for this, have come up with an idea of just making it automatic rather than going through the process, because a lot of people don't make it through the process, or they don't even bother. So go ahead, restore their rights, and let them become productive citizens as soon as possible. Once they've completed, they pay their debt to society. I think it makes a lot of sense.
This has been a tough issue for some members. The governor has been very aggressive during his term of office. I forget the number, but he has restored.
He has the highest number.
Yes, right.
For any modern governor.
So, how does this issue sit with you?
I completely agree with it. I think the key point is that these individuals have already paid their debt. They've served their time. They're coming out, and if we can do this and provide them a seamless transition from prison to back to reentry into the community so that they can do the necessity things that we take for granted every day, they will be much less likely to go back into the system over the long term, because just something as simple as having your driver's license and being able to drive places for employment, to get things that you need to sign up for services and have identification. You can't do a lot of those things that are required as soon as you get out of prison without that license.
I take it there's been some discussion, however, about the definition of what's a nonviolent criminal act in the Commonwealth, and some people are concerned about if that's automatic, would there be a class of people who should not have their rights restored? Have you heard much about that issue?
Yeah, I have not heard much about that issue. That's probably something that's working through the committee process. I know it didn't survive the House. I'm with these gentlemen, and my biggest problem with the current system is it leaves it up to a politician to decide. And Governor McDonald is to be commended for his hard work on this, but we don't know who the next governor may be just as vigilant, but 2-3 governors down the road may not believe in it. And if it's a right, it's a restoration of rights, you shouldn't leave it up to politicians. It should be something that people know and they can count on. You shouldn't have to go kiss the ring of somebody to get your rights back.
More mundane issue, again, one that you're working on, deals with stormwater management. What's that all about?
Well, I'll tell you, last year the General Assembly passed some stormwater management things to help with the Chesapeake Bay, where we happen to live and represent Giles, and I happen to represent Floyd and Pulaski. These areas are having a hard time meeting the deadline, which is 2014, July 1st. And so what my bill simply does is allow that start date of mandatory implementation to 2015. It's really about rural counties. The rural jurisdictions don't have the manpower. In Floyd, their workforce is so small. If somebody calls in sick, the county administrator's out doing bus stops and everything else, and they're just not able to put the resources to this. And they may only have 2 or 3 permits a year. The fee structures also is something I'm concerned about. If you disturb a half acre of land, you have to pay the fee. It's around $2,100. But if a family if your father gives you 10 acres and you're buying a double wide in Floyd, your double wide may cost $30,000, and then 8% of your total value of your home would be in a stormwater permit. And so it's something we have to deal with. I'm trying to get that delayed.
Right.
It'll really help our local localities. It's just another mandate we put on, and I think we're going to have to give them a little break there.
And what about your bill dealing with Virginia military survivors and their dependents?
Yeah, we're going to increase the scholarship. This came from Joint Leadership Council. It's one of their priorities, and what it does is go from $1,500 to $2,000 to survivors for Virginia college tuition. It's a good bill. It was brought to me by the JLC, and I'm very proud of, I'm a veteran myself. My son's currently serving in the United States Army, and my youngest son will be serving in about 18 months as an officer, and it's something that's very important to me. I know John's is a Marine.
Right.
I'm a paratrooper and he's a Marine. We're not former.
Right, exactly.
I marched with him in Blacksburg Parade. He's still got some confidence there.
Once a Marine, always a Marine.
Yeah, well, same with the paratroopers. Same with the paratroopers.
And I know there have been moves to help our returning veterans in terms of encouraging them to create small businesses, do away with some of the regulatory requirements which hinder that effort. I assume those efforts are continuing.
Yes, we've made a lot of progress in the last 10 years, really, in Virginia with regard to improving services to veterans. We created the Department of Veteran Services. We have veteran service, veterans care centers, one in Salem and Roanoke, and 2 others. We also have the first veteran cemetery in Western Virginia, in Dublin. We just opened it up a few years ago. We have more veterans service aides who assist veterans who want to apply for federal VA programs. A lot of times veterans don't know where to go or how to do it, so Virginia assists these veterans to get federal VA programs. We've added the number of people who do that kind of work. So we've expanded services dramatically in Virginia for veterans. And just about every year there's some kind of bill to assist veterans.
I think there's one dealing with the criminal justice system for veterans, especially those who have issues regarding post-traumatic stress syndrome. Talk to us about the need for that and the education that's needed in the criminal justice system for those veterans.
I think that the need is incredibly huge. A lot of these brave men and women who are coming back from war, or who have been back here for many, many years, all the way back to Vietnam and World War II. One of the things they did when they created the Department of Veteran Services, they created the Virginia Wounded Warrior Program. And my wife worked for that program for several years, and so she worked with these individuals as a case manager and resource specialist as they had post-traumatic stress disorder, as they had traumatic brain injury. And what you see with a lot of these folks is that there's a high proclivity for substance abuse sometimes. Sometimes their family life is rocky. Once they return, they're trying to acclimate back to society. And so I think trying to provide proper education not only to them, to family members, but to the general public about some of these issues helps head off things where they're going into the criminal justice system.
And of course, jail diversion would be a component of that as
Absolutely.
well.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that bill allows the court system to take those things into account when sentencing and doing this.
Yeah, for several years there's
training
been,
court
some movement to create what are called veterans courts, and so they're court dockets that handle only veterans-related cases. And so, there's all kinds of movements. There's been mental health courts that look at a lot of the same issues, but this would be specialized just towards veterans.
Joseph Yost has been a real leader, and I've been working with him too on pushing forward with mental health. I've had mental health courts in for the last several years. It always gets killed in the house, by the way. Anything for crisis intervention teams. Joseph used to teach crisis intervention teams, and I've been pushing legislation to add more funding for crisis intervention teams to teach police officers and deputy sheriffs, law enforcement officers, how to detect signs and symptoms of mental illness on the part of citizens that they encounter. So that's been a tremendous benefit. It's expanded throughout the state. 65 or 67
it's almost
localities
3/4 of the Commonwealth
have crisis intervention team programs.
Great.
It started in the Montgomery County area, as a matter of fact.
Great. Another subject which drew a lot of attention last year and continues this year is the fact that the Affordable Care Act was upheld by the United States Supreme Court, gave states a lot more flexibility in terms of Medicaid expansion, some people say it's a great thing, some people say it's a budget buster. What's your view on that? Have you been able to weigh the pros and cons and come to a conclusion yet?
No, I haven't seen the specific legislation. I know if we were to do something along with about expansion of Medicaid, we're going to have to reform the system, and I have to see what that looks like. I don't think I can support it this session, to be honest with you.
John, I know you have some.
I'm a huge supporter of Obamacare, the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act. $2 billion to Virginia. $2 billion for the first year to expand Medicaid from up to 133% of poverty, which is about 50% expansion of Medicaid. Another 250 to 400,000 citizens will be added to the Medicaid rolls if we expand Medicaid, all paid for, this additional, all paid for 100% for the first 3 years by the federal government. About $2 billion a year. What would you do with $2 billion? Just from a job standpoint, about 30,000 new jobs will probably be created by the expansion of the Medicaid program. Plus, these people will get care that they're not getting anymore right now. So I think it's a huge benefit. Where's this $2 billion going to go to? Healthcare providers, nursing homes, doctors, hospitals. There's going to be a tremendous need when you expand Medicaid for services. And the federal government will pay for it. So it's an economic benefit. It's a benefit to the health care of Virginia. It's a benefit to citizens who do not now have health care and they can't afford it because they make too much for Medicaid right now and can't afford health insurance. So this will be a tremendous benefit to the Virginia economy and the Virginia health care system. I was talking to some of the students at the Virginia Tech Carilion School of Medicine just this morning who came to Capitol Hill to talk. And they're hugely supportive, naturally, of the expansion of the Medicaid program. So I think this is a win-win. And I'm very excited about it.
Delegate Yost, someone has a bill in the coffers which would only commit the Commonwealth to take advantage of the federal government's Medicaid expansion largesse for 3 years, and after 3 years decide whether the federal government will maintain its financial commitment. Are you aware of that initiative?
I've heard of rumors of such a bill, but haven't actually seen one. You know, coming from the behavioral health and mental health background, you know, most of the clients that we worked with were on some form of Medicaid. And you know, it was good for them because that was the only insurance that they could get. You know, I think there's general concerns from a lot of folks about that. I think before you actually see a full-blown expansion of Medicaid in Virginia, there's probably going to have to be a call for significant reforms before you get people on board. You know, if you look over the last 25 years, Medicaid has went from being 5% of the state budget to up to 25% of the state budget almost. And so it has grown exponentially. You know, I think there's a lot of concerns on both sides of the issue, and you know, I don't necessarily disagree with John. I don't disagree with what Nick said.
We're going to have to cut you off. I'm sorry, we're out of time. Thank you very much,
Thank you,
Delegate Nick Rush, Joseph Yost, and Senator John Edwards. Good to see you again.
Good seeing you.
Thank you for watching Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and Comcast. Until next time, I'm Woody Evans.